Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Brian Reynolds. He's a principal for the Digital Transformation and Management Practice for Public Sector at Grant Thornton. And let's talk about this concept of FinOps. That sounds like financial operations as it relates to IT deployments, and we'll be getting into the cloud in just a moment. But maybe give us the background on that term and how Grant Thornton approaches it and sees it.
Yeah, sure. I suspect it's a pivot on what is now common terms like DevSecOps and the like, but it really is a philosophy and a management approach to managing cloud and optimizing cloud from both a financial and an operations perspective. So the idea is to bring together those individuals who are IT professionals, along with those folks within the business, and of course, finance, so that we can make sure that the right sorts of cloud resources are deployed and that they're used optimally.
In many ways, that is a FITARA-friendly type of approach too, isn't it, that agencies ought to be taking?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. And then there's the cloud planning process that you referred to. And Grant Thornton, again, with the FinOps concept, has a slightly different take on cloud planning. Most of the planning that you hear federal agencies do is all about the technology. How will we migrate the data and how will we recompile the applications so they run? The questions go on and on and on, but it's got to be paid for and it's got to be budgeted. And so I guess that's where a different approach to cloud planning or a more comprehensive approach comes in. Tell us more about it.
Well, certainly costs are an important part of cloud planning from our perspective. It's absolutely core element of ROI and of understanding whether or not moving to the cloud is in fact makes good business sense. Yeah, you're right. We don't approach migration and migration planning decisions strictly from an IT perspective. We believe not practical to do so. We really do start off by understanding motivations for moving to the cloud, and those motivations can be cost savings related, but they could also be oriented around the need to exit a data center, the need to improve business agility, the need to transition from end of life or end of support technology. So we really do take the time, work with clients to understand their motivations and the outcomes that they're seeking. And those outcomes might be things like reliability, performance improvements, security improvements, the sorts of things that we typically see as pillars within cloud's well-architected framework concepts. We use those understandings of motivation and of outcomes to define a set of outcomes and key results. Basically, we work to establish significant, specific goals to be achieved, and the measurable criteria that we hope to that the agency hopes to achieve through their cloud migrations. And those understandings drive all the decisions we make during the planning process thereafter.
And who should be involved in this type of comprehensive planning for cloud?
Well, for most cloud adoption and migration planning efforts, really we should include participants from across the enterprise. Now that's different if we're dealing with a very specific or singular application or workload that needs to be migrated. It might be a smaller group, but in general, we want to involve individuals from the business. Absolutely, they're affected by these changes. IT practitioners like those on infrastructure and operations teams, application development teams, and ideally professionals from finance and other functions across the business. You can think of it as a sort of biz dev sec FinOps model, I guess, if you want to complicate things.
Yeah, lots of syllables to throw in there. And you mentioned you should take a careful think, I guess, about motivations and also outcomes and goals. How do you distinguish between motivations and outcomes?
Outcomes are measurable. They are defined. They're specific. We have, a motivation might be an interest in cost savings. An outcome is actually a specific targeted cost savings that we aim to achieve through the migration efforts.
And is cost savings, by the way, always an objective of cloud migrations? Because the savings that have resulted to a lot of agencies have been not that big, but yet there are other benefits that may outweigh even an equal cost basis when you're done.
Yeah, cost savings, is one of many reasons that individuals or organizations may have interest in moving to the cloud. It's absolutely not the primary interest. Ideas that come to mind would be, the need to improve operational resilience, the ability to use and react to constituent needs more effectively or more quickly. That sort of business agility benefits, better uptime, more productivity for your team. So there's all sorts of business benefits that need to be factored into the business case. Costs are important, but so are the advantages of cloud that essentially aren't available without great cost anyway on-prem.
In some ways, it's a classic issue then to convince the finance people that everything is not only dollars and cents, and for the finance people to convince the operational people that there is virtue in saving some of the agency's money.
Yeah, and I mean the key there is to quantify it, right? I mean you're right. When we're working with finance, there is a need to quantify or monetize these sorts of benefits, and that can be done. There's ample evidence about the cost of a security breach and the costs that follow a security breach, for example, root cause analysis and remediations. So that provides a good basis for us to quantify or monetize the savings that can be delivered through a hardened, cloud-based deployment or through better operational resilience. I would add, certainly there are true costs of being down, to not having the ability to recover from a disaster, or to not have the proper continuity of operations. And so these are costs that absolutely need to be built into the business case and considered when we're thinking about or evaluating migration opportunities.
And a lot of the savings, a lot of the benefits and so on depend on what workloads you actually move to the cloud, because they all have different implications on the weight of IT operations. And so you've got a definable and defined process that you advise agencies to go through to rationalize the order of events in cloud. Just walk us through how you decide what should go first in cloud migrations, or next if you've already done one.
Yeah, I mean, the process for deciding what should be migrated first and maybe what should remain, this is absolutely based upon what we talked about before. What are your motivations? What are the outcomes you're seeking? What are the OKRs or the outcomes and key results that you aim to achieve? Mission success is obviously an important part of this, and you can look at that really in two ways. If we have an organization that is taking first steps towards moving towards the cloud, we may want to steer clear of those applications that are most mission critical. Or, for example, if cost savings is your primary motivation, then we may want to steer clear of those mission critical applications initially. As an organization becomes more mature, or if we have a business imperative or a market need, that a constituent need that requires mission critical applications to be adjusted or improved, then those become our priority. So really the maturity of the organization is part of what we need to think about, and the objectives or goals that we're trying to sort of enable, absolutely important. I would add that the technical depreciation of the assets being considered has to absolutely be considered. If we have end of life or end of support technologies supporting workloads, and those workloads cannot be retired for one reason or another, they're mission critical, then we want to make sure that we consider those for migration, because those typically will introduce a vulnerability. I think one thing organizations often overlook is that in some ways they've already done an awful lot of the work they need to do to make some of these migration decisions. As part of most organizations' disaster recovery and continuity of operations planning processes, they developed a business impact analysis. It's based upon their CMDB, and accounting of their IT assets. A well-performed or well-built BIA should indicate the impact that processes and underlying assets, IT assets, have on their business processes. So, this is a great place to start. You already have essentially an accounting of which assets and which processes are most important to your business and which have the most effect on brand, finances, constituent support, regulatory compliance, and the like. So this is a great place to start and a great place to begin your thinking about what to migrate first.
And you also mentioned to consider whether the supporting infrastructure is at the end of life or at the end of support. That also goes for code base and applications, I would imagine. Some of those get long in tooth, get expensive to maintain. And I guess at some point, an agency could decide, well, this is the time to move to software as a service. maybe a
Yeah,
commercial.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, cloud migration is absolutely a strategy for tech debt, remediation. That there's certainly the option to remediate in place. And we use the same models that I think your listeners are familiar with. 6 R's model. The idea that we can either rehost, that is sort of quickly lift and shift. That's appropriate if we don't have tech that is seriously depreciated and we need to move quickly. We can re-platform, we can refactor, we can retain, and in some cases, the decision is we need to retire. And so contemplation of the code-based and the tech stacks depreciation is certainly key, key to making those kind of decisions. The timeliness or the need to move very quickly also will drive some of those sorts of decisions.
All right. And well, you mentioned 6 R's, but you only said 5: rehost, replatform, refactor, retain, or retire. What's the sixth?
That's 6. I think that's. I guess I sometimes use refactor versus re-architect. I guess is my 6.
It's a good time then to look at both your hardware and your software assets almost as separate entities when you're doing this cloud planning.
Yeah, I mean, you can take 2 different approaches here. You can sort of take an asset point of view that is looking at all of your hardware and your software, and then moving up to think about which workloads, which processes and business capabilities are delivered. We can also go the other direction, right? We can look at your workloads and we can go downwards and looking at your assets. And it really does have to do with, again, your motivations. If your motivations are maybe cost savings related, then we might be looking more at your assets. If you're looking to improve your customer experience, for example, we might look at your workloads or take an applications view of your migration efforts.
I'm Tom Temin. This is Federal Insights, a more nuanced approach to cloud FinOps, sponsored by Grant Thornton here on Federal News Network.